Morning, Dan and Amy. Know Amy, our newsman Mike Scott just informed me Keith Richards 73 today,
Oh, yeah.
and he's looked like he's 73 since he's been 37. And speaking of aging stars, my favorite news item in terms of the Trump administration and selections for key posts thus far, as many good picks as there have been,
Oh, is this?
is, according to the Daily Mail,
Yeah.
Trump's head of the National Endowment for the Arts,
Mm-hmm.
Rocky Balboa.
Rambo.
Sylvester Stallone, speaking, is 70 years old, and I think if he goes with Rocky for NEA, then you go Drago for NEH, and they could be the Trump Putin undercard. What do you think?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean for
Right.
NEA, NEH is
But they both need congressional approval. That's going to be fun.
And we'll take your calls, by the way. I mean, assuming you get
Yeah.
Rambo.
Well, who's going to contest that?
Yeah.
I mean, is he going to wear his outfit, the Rambo outfit, when he comes in for
I
his
hope so.
congressional hearing?
I hope he does.
Yeah.
And I hope he takes. I hope he takes I hope he does to Congress what he did to Brian Dennehy's little town, and to the NEA for that matter. All right, for more on Trump's cabinet selections and policy agenda, as we're just a few weeks away from the transition, despite what Martin Sheehan thinks is going to happen on Monday, we're pleased to be joined again by Jim DeMint, of course, former senator from South Carolina, where I was this weekend. Lovely.
Oh, yeah.
And now the president of the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, Dan, it sounds like they need you on the transition team. You've got it all figured out.
I'll tell you, this is the kind of creative thinking they're missing, So, give us your assessment of the cabinet selections, particularly as it pertains to economic policy to this point.
Well, we've been really thrilled at the quality of the whole transition operation. There have been folks from Heritage involved with it since the convention, not knowing who would win the election, but hoping we could get good people around whoever did. But the president-elect continues to insist that he is going to get rid of unnecessary regulations, repeal and replace Obamacare, strengthen the border, rebuild the military, get us a good Supreme Court justice, and get our economy going so that there's more opportunity and jobs for people. But really across the board, it's not just directly economics. You'll probably hear something about the budget office in the next couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
People are really focusing on that. But getting someone like Jeff Sessions to clean up the Justice Department, Rick Perry, who knows energy after running Texas, we can open up America's energy supply that probably could do more for our economic growth as well as our foreign policy if America could take basically the dependency from Russian oil from Europe. Again, Tom Price with Health and Human Services, he's a doctor, a great budget guy in Congress, but he knows the healthcare industry, and if we can get Obamacare off the back of business and the American people, replace it with something positive. So I see, as I look across the whole spectrum, particularly EPA, with Scott Pruitt, Attorney General there in Oklahoma. He's been suing the EPA for making it harder and harder for people to do business in America. So across the board, and I shouldn't leave out Betsy DeVos. We've worked with her on education opportunity all over the country, which we really need if we're going to grow our economy long term. So very pleasantly surprised at the quality of people and the continued insistence that Mr. Trump wants to keep his promises.
Well, and the thing, too, I like about this, I want to get your reaction. I like about his selections so far, very kind of innovative selections, not obvious in many cases. And the skill sets that people bring to the table, even, and I should say, too, particularly because one of my concerns about Trump as it pertains to economic policy is his protectionist, mercantilist tendencies. And when you do something like a David Friedman, Milton Friedman's son, as ambassador to Israel, I mean, there's, his signature book, Machinery of Freedom, A Guide to a Radical Capitalism. it's a really interesting choice because he's surrounding himself with people that have a difference of opinion with him on matters like free trade and have a different understanding. The telegraphing Larry Kudlow maybe as chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors as well. So it seems to me he's made some very interesting picks that suggest it is that perhaps some of my fears and the fears of other free market types may be overstated if he's going to listen to some of the people that he's assembled around him to this point.
I think you're right. I believe he's going to be very free market, but he wants to be free market in a way that benefits the American people. And he's right in a lot of ways that our trade agreements over time have tended to favor big corporations unnecessarily. And if we continue to have open trade with the highest tax rate in the world, the biggest regulatory burden, we are going to move production overseas.
Right.
And we can change that by pushing all aspects of economic freedom. I think that with people like Larry Kudlow, Steve Moore, who works with Heritage, is around him, all of these are free market people. And I've seen that Trump just wants to know how to do trade in a way that benefits America.
Senator DeMint, let's move over to the coveted Secretary of State nomination. Rex Tillerson, if he makes it through the confirmation hearings, he would be the first Secretary of State that has never served in the government or served for the military. And do you think he's going to have any problems? There's only 3 Republicans that are needed to block his nomination.
I don't think he will. I don't know Mr. Tillerson personally, but he knows the world probably as well as anyone who's been in politics. He's been negotiating with countries all over the world for years, and you don't become the CEO of the top energy company in the world unless you know how to operate on a global scale. So I think you'll see that our Secretary of State and our State Department under Tillerson is going to focus on economics, making better deals for America. So everything I see about him suggests that he is going to do American foreign policy in a good, tough, strong way. And that's really what our allies and enemies need. We talk with our allies all the time. They come through Heritage. We've probably had 20 delegations since the election of people who want America to retake its leadership role in the world. And everything I know about Mr. Tillerson suggests that he will do that in a good way.
Including but not limited to the personnel decisions Trump has made to this point. What are some concerns you have about Trump in terms of his policy agenda?
Well, I really, the biggest concerns I have is just the people who are trying to protect the status quo in Washington. That the Democrats right now are trying to delegitimize the election. They're going to continue to try to divide the country to make it hard to govern. And all the big special interests, including big corporations and big unions, everyone is going to try to protect their turf in Washington. So Mr. Trump is getting ready to run into a very difficult wall. The reason I think America elected him is they think he might be the one person who would kick it down. But Washington is a swamp. Washington is not working for the best interest of the American people, and it's going to be a fight. What we hope we can do at Heritage is build public support and understanding for ideas that are going to make their life better, make our country stronger. And if we keep doing that, and if the country stays behind these better ideas, hopefully we can break through this maze in Washington that's just protecting itself and all the special interests.
What's your view on the nuclear option with respect to the Supreme Court nominee that's forthcoming, if that's required? Now, of course, Harry Reid blew up the protocol for federal appointees for President Obama in terms of needing 51 votes and not 60, but it was limited to below Supreme Court nomination level if it's needed. If you have to use 51 instead of 60 in order to get Trump's selection for the Supreme Court through, should Mitch McConnell, who I know you've crossed swords with over the years back in your days in the Senate, should he exercise the so-called nuclear option with respect to that nomination if needed?
Well, that's a last resort. I think what President Obama is going to find that everything he did on a totally partisan basis is likely to be wiped from the record, like Obamacare, the things he jammed through. A lot of the appointments will be moved out as quickly as they can. I mean, we need to try to get some of the Democrat Party to support some of Trump's agenda. And he won in a number of states where Democrats are senators. So I hope that's a last resort. Now, and I'm fully convinced if Hillary had won that and the Democrats had the Senate, that they would have changed the rules to make sure that they got who they wanted on the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
I hope the Republicans don't have to do that. But if they really stand in lockstep against the nominees and against just the legislative priorities that the country just gave that mandate to Trump, in effect, I think Republicans are going to have to look at what they have to do to move the country in the right direction. So hopefully that it won't happen. It's a last resort. And I think I'm optimistic that you'll see a number of the Democrats work with Republicans, as the Republicans did to them. There are a lot of Republicans who showed deference to President Obama and his appointments and his judges, and Obama stocked the lower courts as well as the Supreme Court with very liberal folks. And now it's time the country wants to see a different approach. I hope we'll see that from the Senate now.
Now, is there anything that President-elect Donald Trump has done that has disappointed you or made you, cause for pause?
No, but I have to stress that while we have been a resource, we've got people working in the transition office. We're not in a position where we're directing or have any authority to actually appoint people. That's what we do at Heritage. So I'm not going to try to comment on personalities, but I just have to say I feel very grateful that we have a chance to turn our country around. I left the Senate early because I really felt like we could not take 4 more years of what President Obama has done. And now we have that opportunity. So we want to be cheerleaders when they do the right thing. And so far, the people they put in place have been the kind of people that can get the right things done. So we'll hold our criticism until they actually put something bad up. And so far, we haven't really seen any policy proposals that would cause us concern.
Well, one of the other things, Heritage Foundation, one of your outlets is Daily Signal, dailysignal.com. I read it routinely. There's a good piece up today about the whole fake news fight, and with Facebook's announcement yesterday about the monitoring they're going to do in conjunction with Snopes and the Poynter Institute and other, I would say, left-leaning organizations to determine what is fake news and what isn't. How concerned are you about going up against tech giants like Facebook and Google that are potentially looking to target and marginalize substantive conservative viewpoints or free market-oriented legitimate news stories?
Well, I've been watching fake news on NBC and ABC and CBS
There you go.
for a long time.
There you go.
So, I mean, it is a problem that in a democracy, if the people, the voters, cannot get good information, and I have a big concern, whether it's the traditional news and the left-leaning mainstream media or what we're seeing on the Internet. I met with Mark Zuckerberg a few months ago. They know that when human hands touch things, most of their staff is liberal. But he also knows if people are convinced that they are beginning to be biased in one way or another, that this huge Facebook network could begin to crumble. And so I don't think it's in their interest to become overtly liberal, but at where there are human intersections, when you've got thousands of people working for you, most of them from California, most of them young folks, there's going to be a liberal leaning. We have to keep. That's why we have the Daily Signal at Heritage. Is so if people want to know what's going on the Hill, and we're not heavy policy oriented in Daily Signal. Normally, we're telling stories about real people and how policy touches them.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's why you're on, you and Amy, every day. That people really lean on radio talk shows to tell them what's going on. It is a concern of mine But it's been going on ever since news has been provided to people that those in charge are going to have their bias there. But we do know most of the people now in the media lean left, and it is a concern, and we have to do everything we can to overcome it.
All right. He is Jim DeMint, former U.S. Senator from South Carolina, now the president of the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
And you can also get a sit-down I did against the current interview I did with Jim DeMint about 6 months ago at upstream-ideas.com.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.